The stench of blood, oil, and burnt ozone filled the auction hall, clinging to the air like a warning. And among the towering alien bidders with their segmented limbs and biomechanical augmentations, a lowly human moved almost invisibly, her presence fragile against the harsh neon glare of the station. The predator crouched in its cage, a mass of sinew and jagged scars, its obsidian eyes dull with exhaustion, its breathing shallow, almost pitiful, as though the galaxy itself had already given up on it. Auctioneers shouted through built-in translators, calling it defective, unfit for war, a waste of credits, and the crowd responded with clicks and buzzes of laughter, a sound that echoed with the disdain of centuries spent treating life as commodity. Humans were rare in these sectors, and even rarer were humans who dared to step forward and claim a creature others had abandoned without a second thought. She approached, feeling the tremor of anticipation in her chest, her heart aware of every twitch of the predator's ears, every shallow rise of its flanks, and she whispered softly, a sound almost drowned by the cacophony of alien voices. "It's okay. I'm here." Fingers trembling, she transferred the small fraction of her credits, enough to own it, and when the lock clicked open, she did not rush, did not force, did not impose her will, but simply waited, patient as the empty corridors of the processing station outside the auction hall. And after long minutes, the predator stepped forward, limping, every movement calculated against pain, against fear, against the invisible weight of all the lives that had discarded it. She led it to the quarters she had cleared for it, a tiny room of salvaged metal panels and soft mats, not grand or luxurious, but safe. And over the first days she watched, studied, whispered encouragement, learning the rhythm of its breathing, the twitch of its muscles, the exact tension that meant fear, the subtle slack that hinted at curiosity. Each night she brought fresh protein, real food, not the slurry or synthetic blends fed to it by the corporate breeders, and she spoke of earth animals, of wolves and cats, of creatures that lived in balance, that trusted humans to care, that offered companionship in exchange for patience and respect. And for hours she watched its eyes widen with a strange, dawning awareness, the first sparks of feeling ignited where there had been only dull obedience and fear. Weeks passed, and the predator, which she began calling Shade, began to move differently, testing its limbs, shaking off stiffness, muscles trembling as they remembered purpose, as if relearning the very essence of itself. And each correction was gentle, a touch, a word, a small exercise crafted from scrap metal and human ingenuity, designed not to punish, but to guide, to coax strength and trust from a being that had been broken not by genetics, but by neglect, isolation, and the cold logic of alien commerce. The aliens of the station watched in disbelief, some in quiet amusement, others in skeptical curiosity, clicking their jaws and muttering among themselves as a human fussed over a creature they considered nothing more than a defective weapon. And yet, in those silent observations, a subtle shift began, a ripple of doubt, a hint that perhaps value was not always measured in credits or combat potential. Shade's eyes brightened incrementally, the clouded lens of one slowly clearing as infection abated, neural restraints removed by the magnetic extractor she had traded weeks of rations to obtain, and the predator's instincts, once dulled and twisted by the collar's chemical suppression, began to return. Hunting postures, tentative exploratory movements, cautious sniffings of corners, and moments of stillness that spoke of awareness rather than submission. By the end of the first month, the first real test arrived. A maintenance drone malfunctioned in the corridor, sparks flying dangerously close to flammable conduits, and Shade, startled, froze, but the human's calm voice guided it, and slowly it stepped forward, examining the situation, tilting its massive head, and for the first time she saw comprehension, not just fear, comprehension mixed with choice, a silent acknowledgement that she was the one guiding, not forcing. And in that instant, a bond deeper than predator and caretaker formed, one that would later define the meaning of loyalty in the station. Alien traders continued their auctions, selling stronger, younger, more obedient creatures, mocking her for spending her credits on a failed specimen. And she ignored them, spending nights tending scars, massaging atrophic muscles, applying poultices and protein-rich slurries, reading through human veterinary texts, and extrapolating anatomy from Earth species to alien physiology, creating exercises for rebuilding strength that were painstaking in their detail, tracking minute improvements, celebrating when Shade's stance stabilized or when the tremor in her shoulders lessened by a fraction. Moments invisible to any observer, but monumental to those two beings in their quiet shared world. Weeks turned into months, and the transformation was almost imperceptible at first. Subtle improvements in gait, a fleck of tail or ear that indicated alertness, a willingness to approach her hand, the soft nuzzle of a head against her side, signals of trust earned through patience and care. And every click, hiss, and whisper from alien onlookers became background noise, irrelevant to the growing understanding between human and predator. One evening, as emergency drills roared through the station, a container of hazardous materials began to slide uncontrollably down the corridor, threatening both crew and alien machinery, and Shade, without hesitation, reacted, muscles honed by weeks of therapy, claws gripping steel, body moving with predator precision, yet guided by his own choice and the human's unseen trust, holding the container in place until the clamps engaged, and for the first time the entire sector fell silent, watching a being they considered broken act with purpose, courage, and intelligence, not out of programming or coercion, but choice. And the ripple effect began. Quiet conversations among aliens questioning, calculating, doubting their own understanding of life, worth, and loyalty. Kara stood beside Shade, hand resting on his thickened fur, and for hours nothing needed to be said. The predator pressed against her side, chest rising and falling in rhythm with her own, eyes glowing with health and awareness, and the station, vast and indifferent, seemed for a fleeting moment to recognize that human patience, compassion, and the ability to bond were not weaknesses to exploit, but strengths to be reckoned with, subtle yet unstoppable. And as alarms quieted and the sector returned to routine, she whispered once more, "We are just getting started," knowing that months of care, observation, and unwavering trust had set in motion a change that would ripple far beyond the walls of their quiet sanctuary, that this predator was no longer a commodity, no longer a failed auction item, but a living testament to humanity's ability to nurture, heal, and inspire loyalty where none had existed. And somewhere deep in Shade's gaze lay not only gratitude, but the spark of understanding that the galaxy would soon learn. Value is not dictated by utility, and life, no matter how broken, deserves its chance.
Months had passed since Shade first stepped cautiously from his cage, and the station had begun to settle into a rhythm that somehow included him, though the aliens around still whispered, still calculated, still measured life in credits and utility, never expecting that the creature they had dismissed as defective could redefine loyalty and strength. And yet every morning, as Kara guided Shade through stretching exercises, coaxed his broken limb through motions painstakingly reconstructed, and fed him protein-rich meals with hands that trembled from exhaustion and hope alike, the predator grew, muscle thickening under obsidian fur, scars smoothing into hardened resilience, eyes bright with awareness, and slowly, imperceptibly at first, the aliens began to notice the subtle changes, the way he moved with precision yet calm, the careful observation of his surroundings, the way he tilted his head at her words as though understanding not just sound but meaning. And though many still mocked mocked, calling it a human folly, the whispers carried hints of curiosity, of doubt, as if their entire understanding of life and loyalty were being challenged by the quiet transformation in a corner of their galaxy. Then the incident came, sudden, violent, and unstoppable. A cargo transport coupling failed in the industrial sector, sending tons of equipment sliding down the ramps, threatening dozens of alien workers, machines, and delicate conduits that powered life support for entire decks. And in that instant, Kara reacted instinctively, shouting warnings, reaching for controls, but knowing that she could not intervene fast enough alone. And Shade, sensing urgency, without hesitation, without instruction, without coercion, leapt forward, limbs coiling like living springs, claws and strength coordinated flawlessly, intercepting the sliding cargo, his massive form pressing against metal with perfect balance, muscles straining and rippling with the strength she had nurtured, holding the crushing weight until the emergency clamps engaged, and the station froze in disbelief, thousands of eyes wide, jaws clicking, a silence so deep it was almost tangible, as the once defective predator acted of his own volition, saving lives and machines alike, not because of collars or training, but because he chose to. And in that moment, every calculation the aliens had made about value, loyalty, and utility faltered, because no algorithm, no credit assessment, no command could produce the combination of choice, courage, and trust displayed in that sleek, powerful form. Traders and brokers arrived within minutes, shouting offers, trying to quantify what they had just witnessed, waving credits in patterns that had once decided the fates of beings like Shade. But Kara stood firm, hand on his shoulder, voice calm yet unwavering, explaining simply that loyalty, trust, and gratitude could not be bought or sold, that the predator remained not a commodity, but a partner, a friend. And slowly, as hours turned into days, more aliens approached cautiously, bringing injured or discarded creatures, broken limbs, dull eyes, genetic flaws, all asking in clicks, whistles, and translations if they could learn, if they could understand, if humans could show them how to see the value of lives that had been abandoned. Shade, now fully grown, sleek and powerful, moved among them with elegance and curiosity, but always returned to Kara's side, eyes glowing with intelligence, and in their silent interactions, in the simple pressing of head to hand, the leaning against her side, a subtle curling of tail and shift of weight, spoke volumes about the nature of trust that no alien calculation could grasp. And the station began to change. Whispers of human methods spread quietly through corridors, debates ignited about ethics, value, and patience, and the cracks in the rigid utilitarian worldview widened, showing that perhaps strength was not measured by obedience, power, or speed alone, but by the ability to nurture, heal, and inspire choices born of respect rather than fear. Over weeks, more defective beings were brought to her, each with their own histories of cruelty, neglect, and abandonment, and Kara, with Shade ever at her side, demonstrated tirelessly the slow, painstaking process of care, gentle exercises, thoughtful feeding, quiet reassurance, and constant engagement, every action reinforcing the lesson that life, no matter how broken, was worthy of attention, worthy of patience, and that trust could not be enforced but earned, a concept alien to those who had only ever known dominion. And through it all, Shade became not only a protector, but a teacher himself, guiding smaller creatures, correcting errors with a gentle nudge, a careful stance, watching over the weak with the same intelligence that had been cultivated by human hands. And in moments when alien overseers attempted to quantify or claim him, he stood firm, body coiled and eyes blazing with understanding, signaling without words that he was not property, and that the bond forged in patience and respect was stronger than any chain, collar, or command code. The final crescendo came not with violence, but with quiet affirmation, a young alien approached, trembling, holding a creature deemed irrecoverable, and she guided them, showing them how to tend wounds, rebuild strength, speak without fear, and for the first time the alien understood what humans had always known, that compassion is not weakness, that patience is a weapon more potent than any blade, and that life's true value cannot be measured in currency or combat potential. Shade, pressing against her side, his massive form radiating calm power and trust, became the living proof of this philosophy, a symbol of everything humanity had honed over millennia: empathy, resilience, courage, and the stubborn refusal to abandon the broken. And as the station quieted in the afterglow of what had been accomplished, as eyes formerly full of derision now reflected awe, the galaxy began to learn a lesson humans had always carried: that love, trust, and loyalty cannot be programmed, bought, or enforced. They must be nurtured. And in that simple, unspoken truth, every being present understood, perhaps for the first time, that humans were not to be underestimated, not because of their technology or weapons, but because of the quiet, relentless strength of their hearts. And in the press of Shade's head against her side, in the subtle curling of muscles beneath glossy fur, lay the full measure of humanity: patient, reckless, enduring, and unshakably faithful to the belief that every life deserves a chance, and that true strength is found not in dominion, but in the choice to protect, heal, and trust, no matter how impossible the odds.